Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, Joe.
Okay. Everyone in here? All right. Let's settle in. Okay. So, first of all, how's everyone doing? Good? Awesome. Did anyone actually make it out last night? No. Well, personally, I took 2 Benadryl and then was out, so that was my evening. Welcome back, everyone. Yesterday was amazing, and I just really hope that we keep that spirit and that energy with us today. And I want to remind us of one norm that I've been noticing. So the step up, step back. You guys remember what that was about? So let's just, remind each other and ourselves that if we're feeling like we're not participating that much, then try to push yourself to participate more. And if you feel like you're participating a lot, then maybe take a step back today. So we have a really, really exciting day, and we're going to start off with strategy, and that's, I know for many of you, something that is a challenge and also something that's exciting as well to think about. So I'm really looking forward to it myself. So a couple of quick announcements. So first of all, I know there's a couple of lost and found items. If you did lose anything in your room last night, come let me know. And also, if you could be on the lookout for a walkie-talkie, we have a misplaced walkie-talkie. And then what else? All right. Well, I think that's it. So let me just review for you what happened yesterday, and then we're going to launch into today. So yesterday, again, as you remember, we started out with our stories of self. So that was a story about our own values, our own choices. And then we moved from there into the one-on-one. So that was about interacting and exchanging stories to uncover the group's values, interests, and resources. We then did the building teams, where you came up with your shared purpose, your team name, and your chant. And we ended up with a story of us. So stories of us and why, we're a community, what brings us together. So with that, we now have strategy. Woo!
So it seems like, can you hear me well? It's kind of good. It seems like I'm the strategy because my name is Peja, and welcome everyone. You feel excited? Oh wow, that's the spirit I can see there. So I just briefly, I put this bike on the board because I wanted to. We promised that we will teach you and we'll work with you how to ride a bike, and that was the question yesterday. And it seems like it's a better metaphor for some other things that we do. So remember yesterday we started with narrative with some introduction in the whole bike theory. So this is our bike. We kind of introduced that, and Marshall did that for us. Marshall, are you upstairs? We don't see you by the computer. Hi, Marshall. Morning. Then we talk a little bit about the narrative, like the story of self. And there we had some presenters there. Who was the presenter for the story of self in the group? Who were presenting in the big group? Do you remember? Okay, great. Hi. Then we moved to the relationship piece, which was presented by Dave. Dave, are you in? Yeah. Hi, Dave. And then after that, we went to the structure. If I remember very well, the structure, which was presented by Wing. Hi, Wing. And then after the structure, we moved to the story of us. And that's how we ended up the day. And who were the presenter for the story of us? I remember Danielle. Yeah, hi. And then who are the other people? 3? I think there was 3 people. You were the presenter. Then, so let's just start by giving them a round of applause, because that's how we ended up the day yesterday. And it was a long day, I know, and this one is going to be long as well. Sorry, but I think that's the way how you learn to ride a bike. And today, actually, right now, we're going to focus on the strategy. As you can see, the bike metaphor is not just like that. You can see that narrative is coming as a power. It's coming like something that pushes you, something that motivates you. Then you have the commitments. There are the wheels. During the relationship building, you get the commitments, and those are the things. Relationship and commitments are things that are moving the bike, are kind of putting the thing on rolling. And then you have the structure, the themes that you built as a frame of the bike, like something that's holding the whole thing together. And then, like in this piece that we're going to work right now is a strategy. It's something that will kind of like direct you where you want to go, and how you want to achieve that, what you want to do. But before we dive into that, I really need to take a couple of minutes to tell you something about myself, and to tell you something about where I'm coming from and why I'm doing this work that I do. And usually when people ask me that, like if it's a short version, I would say like I always wanted to be a doctor. And there's a picture of me like with a stethoscope when I was a small child, when I was a kid. And you know, it's like a story with all flowers, nothing was happening there, and everything is fine, and I'm a doctor. And I hear that story a lot of times from different doctors. Like they always knew that they want to be that. But for me, it was something completely different. And when I was a kid, again, it was around this time in southern Serbia, in Niš, where I was born, that we had those big like family festivities, like events where we were making it's a famous thing in Serbia. It's like the paprika, where you kind of put it on a grill, and then you make something called ajvar, and that ajvar is something that you hold for the winter. And my father was the one to organize those events. And I remember my grandmother, she was kind of hunting us with a stick whenever we put a fingers in a new jar. And it was a huge event because like the family was really huge, like sometimes like 40 people on those events. And for me, those events were really a source of joy. As a kid, I was just thinking about them, okay, this is great, this is fantastic. And the first time, on one occasion of those events, we ended up with a lunch. We finished the lunch, and we were in the room, and I look at my father, and he started sweating. And those like things that kind of were showing on his face, he was completely white and started sweating. And I look, people who kind of moved around him, and everybody's talking around him, and I was afraid. And what happened is actually he had a heart attack. And then we went to hospital. I didn't know what's happening. I was just like with a bunch of people, like with my 3 uncles and my grandmother, went to the hospital there. And I didn't know what is going to happen to my father. But then after that, he recovered. And he recovered because at what I interpreted right now, and in my head as a kid, there was a bunch of people in white coats that kind of helped him to recover. And I guess that stick in my mind, that picture of a person who can save my father. But on the other day, like a couple of years after that, on the December 11th, I look at my mother, and she was completely crying, with her eyes swollen and completely like red. She has really blue eyes, but then at that morning they were red. And I look at her, I knew it was something wrong, and she said like, your father died. Taja, like we call him Taja, it's like in Serbian, tata, father. Taja died. And I think that was the moment when like all those joyful moments where we get as a community, as a family, were taken away from me in a way. And it stopped because my mother take me and my brother, and we moved to Belgrade, which is the capital of Serbia. And she did it because she was a fighter. She wanted us to have a better future, and she knew like probably it will be better in Belgrade, but it also because she wanted to run away from the pain that we were all experiencing as a family at that particular moment. So, and don't get me wrong, my mother she's a real fighter, and her family is all about fighting. Like my grandfather was a fighter in the Second World War. He has a hole in his hand that we played as children because he got a bullet during the war. He was he was like, her whole family is about revolution. You know, my grandmother, she was working in like a communist movement against her father, my grandfather. So my mother was equipped for fighting. And she kind of like during those 90s, which in Serbia were really challenging years, she kind of did it for us as well, because she was equipping me and my brother for fighting. So when I got to the medical school, which was well, it was not an obvious thing to do. Now I reflect on that, but I kind of followed that path. And I decided to go to the medical school. But the first thing that I needed to do is like, okay, I need to pick up my fight. You know, we all fighting with something. That was something that I was living with. So I need to pick up my fight. And I pick up the HIV/AIDS fight. And the reason why, there was no particular reason why I did it. Like there's no like, oh, I had someone with HIV/AIDS or something like that. But I just picked it up because it was near to the high school that I was, like the organization that working was near to the high school where I was. But it's also, it was the community that was happening there that kind of brought me to the whole cause. Because it was a youth-driven organization with, at that time, 5 young people wanted to do something, and they invited all of us, like, come, you should come, we should do it together. And for me, that was a way to kind of start doing something meaningful, something that is really contributing, but also having a fightful moment. So we started developing that organization, and just to cut the short story long, in a couple of years, in each city in Serbia, I had a bed and a friend and a place to sleep, because we built up a whole community of young people fighting HIV/AIDS. And that community was kind of really cool for me, but what was challenging is that I was not connecting it to the medical school. After third year of my medical school, I wanted to drop out because it was like what I was doing, like educating young people about HIV/AIDS, it was nothing about the medicine. And everyone was talking about, you're doing the wrong thing, you're educating people, you're not working with patients, you're not treating no one. And in my head, that was like an answer to that. So I wanted to drop out. But in one occasion, like in a Belgrade cafe, I was sitting and a girl approached me. She was like black hair, kind of really messy. And she said, you literally saved my life. What are you talking about? You literally saved my life because I watched you on the TV two weeks ago, and I decided to get tested, and I'm negative, and I'm going to change the way I live. So after that statement, I realized what I'm actually doing is healing people. It's helping people. It's not just, you know, something abstract like I'm doing the education. It's connected to the medical, and there is a place for me in medicine. And that's what brought me up to the whole public health. And I finished the medical school and graduated here from Harvard School of Public Health, and brought me back to the whole idea of there is a place for me in medicine. And I think sometimes, like even right now, I'm really trying to do stuff in Serbia in terms of the public health and how we can advance and heal the communities rather than just one person. And for me, it's like when Andrew invited me to this PCP seminar, I said like, oh, that's for me. Because I felt like the connection with the primary care people, in a way, the same thing like with public health people. And I don't know why, but for some reason I felt that we are underdogs in the community of health. But then also that we have a really strong sense of what we need to do and why we need to do it. And I kind of was reaffirmed yesterday when I was listening to your stories that what I'm doing back in Serbia and what you're doing here is something actually worth fighting for and worth building a community around. So I just want to like say to you that it's a real privilege to be here and really privileged to talk to you and really privileged to kind of share what I learned and what I'm able to do in terms of organizing, in terms of building communities in the medical area. So thank you for that. And okay, so that was me. But we need to move on. So just before we dive into the strategy, like a really, really big thing, I just wanted to point it out to you that yesterday we were talking about, I guess this is not working well, we were talking about the narrative and the strategy. And the narrative piece was the heart, like was how we can bring up and mobilize the soul and what we believe is really important. And that's the answer to a question why we do things. And the other side of this kind of chart is the head, the strategy. And those two things are important for us to getting us into the action, to do the real stuff. And I was like, as any medical physician or medical student or resident, I was curious about this thing. So I look at the research, of course, like the data. And what was interesting in neuroscience, like in evolution of humans, those two things happen in the same way, in the same moment in life. Like narrative, which means like starting to talk and like using language to give meaning to things, was happening in the same time as strategy, which like figuring out the tools that we need to do something, to solve the problems with. So it was not like first we developed the language as humans and then we kind of figure out the tools, but it was actually happening in the same time. And the reason why I want to emphasize that is that most of the time today, we separate those two. We say like, if you're emotional, you cannot be rational. If you are rational, oh, emotion is not good for you. Or just think about being just rational, you don't need emotion at all. But in order to do the action, I just want to remind you again, it's actually to have both things. And only when those both things occur in the same time, you can do something meaningful and you can create something that is a real action. So having that in mind, how many people did strategize this morning? Anyone strategize? What did you strategize about?
I got up, I set my alarm clock like an hour before, brushed my teeth,
Okay.
combed my hair, took the shower, got dressed, looked at the little map of how to get from the hotel to the conference, followed the directions. Made a wrong turn.
Oh, really?
Asked somebody for directions to get to the right place.
Okay, so your strategy about how you're going to get that once the moment of wrong turn was occurring. So you kind of made the wrong turn and then think about what you're going to do next. So from this example, what is required to strategize? What do you think? Thank you. So sorry, what is your name? Michael. Thank you, Michael. So what is required to strategize? What do you think? Go ahead.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I think foresight
Hi.
in terms of possibilities, what are the different things that could happen?
Okay, like seeing the bigger picture. What else? What else?
Information and resources.
In his particular case, what you're talking about? Like information and resources?
Like the map that he was referring to.
Okay, that's great. You need to have some resources, at least something to start with. What else? Adapting? How come? What do you mean by that?
Had to kind of get reconfigured.
Whoa, hello. Was that me? Yeah. You turned it up? Okay. This is an important moment, I guess. Like, so now we need to strategize. Now we need to strategize about this moment. Yeah, thank you, Dave. So what do you mean by that?
So adaptation, just took a wrong turn, had to reconfigure, figure that out, navigate. That wasn't anticipated.
So what actually he did, like in those kind of moments that you were explaining? But what was that? Like what he needed to do?
Express a need.
Express a need. What he needed to do?
Needed a new strategy.
New strategy. So, but he was making choices, and that's I think that's really important because like when you strategize, you're making choices, and then you're like when you were kind of like you take the wrong turn, and then you feel like, oh, how I'm gonna get to the whole place, and then you kind of make a intentional choice to ask someone, but that person could then send you to a completely different place. But you were lucky, I guess, because you're here. But the point here is that we do strategize all the time. And it's not a big thing happening like a McKinsey company that kind of you need them to come and give you all the spreadsheets and science and whatever to be able to strategize. We do it as humans all the time. Like we do it every day. We do it like, every day for a couple of, maybe like 100 of times, like a lot of times. And what is happening here is that we do it naturally. It's something that we kind of like live comfortable with. Like, oh yeah, I took a wrong turn, so what I need to do right now, let's figure out a way to how to deal with this. But it's also important to acknowledge that we are doing it under conditions of uncertainty. In one point where you actually don't know what to do, when there's something new happening. It's not like that you strategize about brushing your teeth, but it's like you walk up, you know that there was a brush and there was like toothpaste, but if there was no toothpaste, then will be the moment that you strategize. You need to have a condition of uncertainty in order to engage in real strategizing moments. So I will give you just a brief, like a really short definition of strategy. that we use in terms of organizing in this work. It is to turn what we have into what we need to get what we want. So can I just repeat it again? So to turn what we have, the resources that we have, into what we need, something that we need, the ability to do something, to get what we want. And it's a really simple definition of strategy, and the reason why it's simple, why it's so simple, I think it's why it's so powerful as well. And I will give an example. I was working for the Ministry of Health, and that was a wrong decision in my life, but I kind of, at one point, I was working for the Department of Health in Serbia, Ministry of Health in Serbia. And like we had like a website, and on that website, like 38 different strategies. You know how I actually figure out what are the real strategies and what are not the real strategies? Ideas? How we can figure that out?
You saw where the money went.
Exactly. I asked the question like, is there a budget for a strategy? And usually that's the question of resources. If there's no budget for strategy, there's no actual strategy. So it's if somebody figure out the budget, then actually they sit down and say like, what do we have? What is actually that we have? What resources we have to allocate to solving this problem? Other than that, like the really nice strategic goal and the list of things that we want to do is like what we want is a wish list. You know, I can say like I want a Rolls Royce and I want to drive a Rolls Royce, but when I open my wallet and there's like $10 in that wallet, you know, that's just a wish list. But if I'm saying like, oh, I have $10, and let's figure out the way to use those $10 to make like whatever, and to get to the point where I can buy a Rolls Royce. So it's like a really simple thing. But then the second question and the second teaching point I want to make is that we do not strategize if there's no motivation to do it. So why do you think it's the case? Do we strategize when we have everything? Do we do it? When we have enough people, enough resources, do we need to strategize? Uh-huh. Yeah, strategy is something that we do when there's motivation. And there's a really clear example that I have from my medical work is that there was this doctor, he was like a professor in our school. He was a crazy guy with you know, like Einstein, like really kind of crazy, and always have like 10 students around him, really, really engaging. And during the 90s, they lack of surgical threat. He was a surgeon. So there was a lack, there was a shortage of surgical threat. So he was really smart. He said, like, he asked the nurses, oh, what we can do about it? Is there a way for us to think about it differently so we can save more people? Because it's about people's life. That's what we do as doctors. And they said like, oh, we should cut it like half and then use half of it for patients. But then what he needed to do with his team is actually figure out how to make a stitch with half of the surgical threat. I know it's probably something that you will say, oh, you like malpractice and you get a lawsuit for that. But at that point, that was the only way to actually save some people. So you see, what I'm making the point here is that because they were facing that lack of resources, they need to sit down and figure out the way how to actually help more people. So in campaigns, when we do the campaigns and when we just bring it to our work, this is what we want to, the reason why we're putting the campaigns there is partially because we want to make our effort as an arrow, like time as an arrow, but it's also because we want to kind of bring that urgency of people sitting down and figuring out what they're going to do in order to be able to change things. So does this make sense? I see some nodding heads. What any comments, any questions on this? Go ahead.
Who brought up the point, or maybe it was Professor Gans, that we don't respond to an inconvenience, but we respond to an injustice. And I think it's kind of the same idea. It requires some kind of lack in order to really move people to action.
Yeah.
And clearly strategizing is the first step when there's a change.
Exactly, and it's like yesterday we were talking about the motivation to engage in that, but now it's also a question of figuring out how, and that's the way, the reason why we are, like most of the time as humans, that's how our brain is actually wired. The moment we have that urgency, have the clear problem in front of us, we need to deal with that. So the other point is that strategizing is not like doing this thing for once and then you don't go back. And why do you think it's the case? Why do you think the strategy is not like a written in stone? That's something that people often repeat as a kind of. Why do you think it's important to think about the strategizing rather than just strategy? Any ideas? Wake up.
I'll say something. Also, just to test the mic, make sure it's now working, which I think it is. I usually screw up the first time.
Oh, so what happened then?
So then I have to re-strategize.
So what do you think about it? You kind of raise, yeah.
Because your resources and your challenges are constantly changing. So if you just stick to one, if you just create a strategy and just write it in stone and that's the strategy you're going to use, then it's not always going to work. And, you know, the different things you're facing and the different things you want to accomplish should be changing if you're viewing your campaign as an arrow.
Well, I don't need to say anything about after this. This is like exactly because the resources, the circumstances you're working in are changing, and they're changing sometimes in a, like most of the time we think about the wrong way how they can change, but they can change in a positive way. Like, let me give you an example for the work we did in Serbia. It's like we wanted to mobilize volunteers for the campaign working with doctors, and then we set up a call, put it on a Facebook, and then we wanted 30 people to join us. 30 people. We were kind of like modest. We didn't want that bigger than that. And then like what we ended up with, 100 people applied. So we sit down and say like, oh, we have those 100 applications, and we just need 30, and we got those 30, and then those 70, we just get rid of them. We just say like the message, oh, we don't need you. We kind of selected 30 people. But then afterwards, like Nikola, one of the guys who is really doing the thinking part in our Serbia on the Move team, he said, sit down and said like, but you know, if we just sit down and strategize at that moment, we would actually come up with a logic how to engage all of them, like 100 of them, rather than just limiting our resources for 30. So just to be clear that this is like, first of all, it's hypothesis testing. That's the way how we learn. It's not like we learn about some things like we figured out everything out in our room and then that's gonna be the perfect thing. And it's actually when you go out and test something and then you get the feedback of that testing, is it working or not? That's how we learn as humans. So in a way, it's really important to be really intentional about strategizing rather than strategy. And you will see during this workshop, we're gonna do it, and the way we're gonna do it is we're only gonna try to do it. And this will be the first draft of your strategy, probably. And then you will go back and then you will try some things, you will do the actions, you will do the kickoff tactics, you will get the feedback, and then you will need to sit down again and do re-strategizing whenever there's a change in resources. And I think we as doctors, we are really good, and other healthcare providers, we are really good at figuring out the change. Seeing when there's a change in something, like, you know, it's just, we are looking for those details. And when we see those details, we react. So I kind of invite you to react on those details. So any questions, comments, or ideas? So I'm seeing the fine 5 minutes, so I need to move on. The next important thing is that it's when you think about a strategy, and strategy is coming from the Greek word strategos, which I don't have to explain here because it's there. Like strategos means the general, and tacticus is actually the soldiers. So in order for us to be able to strategize, we need to move to get here, to see the bigger picture, to see what's going on in the field and how we're going to deploy tacticas, which is tacticas, and how we're going to deploy those tacticas in order to achieve the goal. So it's basically what we have, seeing what we have to turn in what we need to get what we want. But, you know, I recently read an article about a strategy, and they said like, show me the company where the people who are doing stuff are not involved in the planning, and I will show you the company who is not actually achieving their plan. Because if you're not able to get down here and see what's happening in the real field, you cannot see what's going on there. And most of the time you will not be able to kind of figure out the right moves that will help you move towards the goal. So you really need to be here and go back and forth in both directions. Be able to kind of see the big picture from the general point of view, but also be able to go down and see what's happening with the people you're working with and how they are actually implementing stuff. And in terms of, just one thing in terms of the strategy in the context of organizing, in the context of what we do here, is mainly focus on power. And Marshall talked a lot about the power yesterday, and we kind of like engage in that conversation, how it was important. And we will do it in a Montgomery bus boycott. You will talk. But I just want to shortly give you an example that I developed for the students in the distance learning course that we worked on. It's a story, of course, but it's an imaginary story. It's a story about the rock. That's something. And the story goes like this. There's a village, and those village people are living in that village. And they have, like, their living is modest, but they have only one road towards the city. And that's the road how they get the food from the city. So one day they wake up and somebody kind of shouts like, oh, there's a rock on the road, like a big, huge rock blocking the road. So we cannot get to the city anymore. We cannot get the food. So they start, well, they're facing the problem. So what do you think they do at that point? They strategize. Exactly, somebody is saying like they strategize. They sit down and think like, okay, what should we do with this rock? Like, how are we going to deal with that rock? And someone from the group shouts like, oh, let's raise awareness about the rock. It's like, okay, let's raise awareness. So they started like, okay, that's one hypothesis, let's do that. So they go around the city and giving the brochures and stuff to the people and say like, there's this rock on the road and we have to be aware of the rock. And they are all aware, but like at one point someone says like, you know, but we are not getting any food, you know. Like awareness is great, but there's nothing happening. So what do they do next? Then again, they get together and what they do? They strategize again, yeah. So what is that? Like other person said, like someone has said, like, well, why should we not call some of those organizations that are doing advocacy? They have those big machineries and stuff, and they can come take out the rock and you know, solve the problem for us. So, oh, this sounds like a better idea than raising awareness. Let's go do that. And they went to the organization and they bring the machinery and stuff, and they move the rock, and everyone is happy, so they can go to the city. They get the food. Next morning, another rock falls on the road, and they're still like, oh, what are we going to do right now? And they start calling the organization, and they get the answer, oh, we are not working in your region anymore. Now we have moved to Afghanistan because there's a need there. So what do you think they will do next? Strategize again. So, and then one person said like, okay, why don't we just go together there and work together, push the rock, not only one person, but all other people, and try to move the rock. So they went the whole village there and then pushed the rock. And they realized that when they work together, not just one person, they are actually able to move the rock. And that's what is organizing in a way all about, is how you can bring people, not like ideas, technical concepts and stuff, how you can bring people to address reconfiguring power relations, to build power in order to achieve something that they need. And it's different from advocacy, because in advocacy you need someone else to solve the problem. In this case, you're working with the people who are actually in need to create their agency to be able to solve the problem. And I think that's what really distinguishes the organizing from other practices. And it's so tough. I must tell you, it was so difficult for me to learn it. That's why I developed the story, in order to kind of create that sense, especially in the medical context. When, you know, power relations are not addressed in our context. You know why? Because, you know, nobody's talked about like differences between primary care people and surgeons. We talk about it in our own rooms, like when primary care practitioners get up and say like, oh, those surgeons are taking all the work from us. They have so much higher status than us. Then like public health people get together and say like, oh, nobody's kind of respecting us. Like we are doing this community work, but actually there's no one kind of. But in a wider arena, it's not addressed. We're not talking about the power, and there's a lot of power issues there. Trust me, there's a lot of power issues there. But because we are like doctors, we are supposed to be, kind of fearless and have all the power in the world. We actually don't talk about it. So in a way, I really invite you, we will do the case right now because I'm seeing the sign move on. But really invite you to think about those things in terms of organizing is about building power. And that's what it is. And the strategy is a way you to think how you can mobilize people to build that power. How to do that in a way. Does this resonate at all? I see some nodding heads, some of like dying heads. But okay, let's move on now. So yesterday we asked you to read the case, Montgomery bus case, bus boycott case, and it's a really great example of the organizing, how organizing works. So without being, so I guess you know the context. I don't need to give the context. It's usually in Serbia when we do this work, I have to do the whole thing of introduction. What is Montgomery bus boycott? Where is Montgomery? Where is Alabama? Where is United States? Whatever. But I guess you know. But it was, it was something that you're familiar. How many people have read the case? And be honest. Oh wow. Thank you. This is pretty impressive. So we can do some great work here right now. So from your looking at the case, who are the people that are facing the problem in the case? Like, on a wider sense, who are the people? Go ahead.
Black community.
Black community. Okay, so we'll put them like, this is like black community. So those are the people that you can see in black community where? That's the question. In Montgomery? Well, in Alabama. Well, so it's a really specific community in this case. So what was the problem that they were facing on a bigger scale? Like, what was the problem? What do you think? Segregation law. But even a bigger problem. Racism. Okay. So the problem that we're facing, and I'm sorry really that I'm not good at this because I'm just not good at writing on big boards. But the big
Would
problem
you like
that
a volunteer to scribe for you?
Well, that would be really cool. Kind of voluntolding. Oh yeah. So Emily, would you like to do it? Yeah. Thank you. So the racism is the big. So what do you think was more particular problem for this particular group in the case? So it's the racism is the bigger picture. Then you said like a segregation. That was the problem. So yeah. Can people see this? Yeah. Okay. So the smaller thing is segregation. And then what was the even smaller thing within the case? Segregation where? Is in a school, in buses, in transportation. So why do you think it's important to get to this point of segregation in the buses? Why do you think it's relevant for the people? Why do you think this is? Did you hear this? It's segregation on the buses was a specific thing. And why do you think that specific thing? Thank you. What is your name? Julia. Thank you, Julia, for that. Why do you think it's important to get to the specific thing? Well, to measure outcomes, to know what are you. You know if you're fixing the problem or not. But what else? That's great. You can use whatever resources to focus on one thing rather than spreading out the resources. But what else? Yeah.
It's something that every black person in that community had experienced, so it's easy to create the story of us and then transition to now.
Exactly. It is. I think that's really an important thing, and I will use this. We were doing this work with students from China, like the seed workshop with Marshall, and someone said like this is like a martini glass. So it's something like a martini glass. So you go from this big problem, which is racism, and then you kind of narrow it down towards something that is really real for people. And thank you for that comment, because I think that's, well, apart from also it's important to focus the resources on one thing, to have something measurable and tangible so you can see are you making results or not. But the reality of that problem is what makes it concrete and what makes it really strategic. Because racism, like in Serbia, I'm doing the anti-corruption campaign, and with anti-corruption in healthcare campaign. And what was our biggest challenge is like how to figure out the small thing that is real for people, that is not like, oh, we want to fight corruption. Sure, everyone wants to fight corruption, and there's nothing about, and the most time people feel like there's nothing we can do. So by narrowing down that to a strategic goal, to, in this case, segregation on the buses, you kind of focus it on something that's real for people and something that you can do something about, rather than having a racism as a big problem. So let's go back to the community. So who are like, when you say black community, was there any people in the community in particular who were more interested in this problem than others? What do you think? So it was the whole black community in Montgomery, Alabama? Everyone? Go ahead.
People who were dependent on taking the bus every day.
Exactly,
The
yeah.
wealthy African Americans had cars. So.
Yeah, so we have one particular group in here that was even more targeted by blacks, so people who are taking the bus. So, but who else is interesting? So they were the one who really want to solve that problem because they were taking the bus every day and they felt the injustice of being kind of like sitting in being segregated and stuff. So it was real for them. So who else wanted to solve this problem from within the black community? Pastors. Who? Pastors. Why
Pastors.
Why do you think they wanted to solve the problem?
Because they felt responsibility as leaders to help motivate and make a change in their community.
Yeah. So the reason why they wanted to solve the problem is not necessarily they were facing, well, some of them might face the same thing, but it's also the connection with the bigger issue, like the bigger thing that the whole community was facing, in this case, racism and segregation. So who were other people, other groups that were in this women? Oh. What did they do?
It seemed like from the reading that they were really the first people that organized together, got together.
Were they part of this community?
Yes, definitely.
Yes? Okay.
Yeah. But they got together and shared their personal voice and used their personal power, which was access to the schools.
Yeah. So who else was there? So it's women as well. So who else was there in that community? Anyone else? Do you remember from the case? How about taxi drivers? Were they interested in somehow interested? And then those people who had cars, were they interested as well? To a certain extent, yes. So then the question for us, like, do you remember who was actually leading this group? Who were the people who were on the leadership team? Nixon, who else? Rosa Parks, do you remember her? Who else? King, well, at some point. Who else? There's this guy, lawyer. Remember his name? How about the doer? Gregg, exactly, thank you. So so you see that within this community, there was a smaller group of people who actually kind of thought about what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. And it's when you look at and your structure, it's the leadership team. So let's look at the even bigger picture. So who else was, like, from the reading the case, who else was interested or have any kind of stake, not necessarily the need, but any kind of stake in this case in particular? So who were other actors in the field? Bus drivers, okay. So let's put them outside here. So bus drivers, who else? Police. White community. So who else? Media, that's great. Who else? The employers? Okay. Okay. So who else was interested? Oh, why they were interested?
Because they were interested in the bigger part of Arlington
Yeah, they can help them do that. So was there any other groups there where we're kind of supporting the whole thing or just wanting to be part of it from the case? Do you remember? Sir? Yeah. Yeah. So there were different actors in the field, and you kind of like, you see them all there. So the question now is like, out of those actors, who had the power to solve the problem? What do you think? Remember the problem? The problem is segregation on the buses. It's a specific thing. Who had the power to solve that?
The power was the people who rode the bus.
Uh-huh. How come?
Nobody else could keep them from. Nobody else could keep them from riding the bus, or somebody could tell them. But if somebody else decided not to ride the bus, or if a smaller subset of people who didn't ride the bus, if all the people with cars decided not to ride the bus, it wouldn't have done anything.
So let me ask you just one question. Did they figure that out right away from the case, from what you were reading?
No.
So what did they figure out? What was the first thing that they figured out? How they gonna address this problem? You remember Rosa Parks? She did what they did. She got arrested. Then, like they took her out of the jail, and they talked and discussed like what they're gonna do. And then there was this moment of discussion with her.
They're gonna take it to court, I guess.
They wanted to take it to the court. So what was that? What was that? Their first strategy was to take it to the court. And then by taking to the court, make it a court case, and winning that court case will probably, but what happened in between? What happened in between? Yeah, but what like in terms of their strategizing and thinking about what they can do about this problem, what happened?
They realized they have to go through the state before they can go to Supreme Court.
Uh-huh.
They knew the state would take the case.
Yeah. So what did they need to do at that particular moment? Create a different strategy. Like re-strategize things. So you see, like it's not like, even with this case, this is the most famous case. It's not like, okay, we sit down and figure out everything, and then that's it. We're gonna follow. So you need to re-strategize based on resources and things that are happening along the way. So how they so then the question was like, what was the next thing? Like, what was how they were thinking about this case in particular, after they figure out that what you said. Are we on time, Nicholas? Okay, 5 minutes. So what was the next thing?
They had to figure out how to continue to maintain their boycott.
Uh-huh. So what they figure out is actually that they have their own feet, like we were talking about that. And there's something that they can do as a community to be able to create some power, to generate some power. So the question for me is like how that kind of realization kind of affected the strategic thing. What was the strategy? What was the strategy they had in mind? Okay, we're just going to walk to our work, and we're going to not use the buses, and it's going to be like that forever. So yeah.
The first idea was to use the Negro taxi cab community, maybe get cheaper fares or subsidize that. But then law enforcement found out about that, so they had to re-strategize, and then they thought about the carpool system with the wealthy black community.
So those were those two strategies that you're talking about were actually a power with strategies, something that they build up as a community, thinking like, okay, what we can do from our own resources, not thinking about the resources that other people have, but what we have as our resources, like taxi drivers or the carpooling, that we can use in order to be able to continue this thing of fighting for segregation on the desegregation on the buses. So what do we need to do to continue that work? And they use the resources and they build power with because they share the car and stuff. But then the question is like, what was their strategy towards actually making that change, achieving that strategic goal?
Well, in terms of carpool, they actually had, they asked people who had done it before kind of what they did and how they organized it, and rather than reinventing a wheel that was already working in Baton Rouge, they just asked for help.
Oh, okay, so they use some of the resources that other people have, some experiences and stuff. But in terms of creating the change, because remember their strategic goal was desegregation on the buses. So go ahead.
They had to make it known that they were a resource that was needed to the community that was outside of their community. Because if they didn't matter, if what they cared about didn't matter to the people who matter, then it was never going to be changed. So by like making themselves, by drawing themselves out of the bus circuit, they made people realize that they were an important part of the community.
They were important part, but even more important, they were actually affecting some people. And who were they affecting? Bus company. Like all people not using buses, no bus fares. Like it's a clear way to actually put a pressure on someone. Like there's no money for you guys. We're using our feet to go to work. We are creating power with because we have taxi drivers, carpools. And so what was the result of that? What was the result? What was the result of the case? They won. So who actually affected that decision? How did that happen? Sorry, just shout it.
It's the federal court said it was not.
Yeah, that was the end result. But just the thing is that they affected the bus company. So actually the bus company started pressuring the politicians to say like, this is not going to work because we are losing money here. So you need to figure out something about this. So it's like, I just want to make sure that you understand that how this goes, because it's like, you see that what was happening here. So you have like a big problem that you kind of narrow down to the strategic problems, so something that is really real to people. But then you think about the different groups of actors that are in the field. Some of them will be your opposition. Some of them will be your allies. Some of them you can use for experiences, like you say, like learn from them. But at the end of the day, it's about power. And don't fool yourself with, okay, we're going to solve this by giving the brochures to the Rock. Rock is not going to move. And there's like, no, it's like, I think I love this, like, I think it was Ed Chambers who said that, don't go to power for decision, go to power with decision, which is a completely different thing. Because if you think about like going to power and then ask someone like, okay, can you help me with this? If they just go to politicians and say like, oh, we have this situation on the buses, so let's make a committee and research on whatever buses is about. But what they did is actually build some power by bringing people together in order to be able to achieve their goal, in order to be able to achieve their strategy. So what we're going to do right now, you're going to break up in a small groups, and you are going to answer all those questions that we are trying to answer here in the context of what you are doing. So basically, the first question would be, who are my people? So who are your people? Who are you working with? Who is your constituency? And what is different from just people in general to constituency is that constituency is able to do something about it. So it's not like, oh, those are the people who are, but it's actually the people who can do something about the problem, but also affected by the problem in a way. Then the second question would be, what is their problem? How we can make something maybe abstract, like primary care is not definitely it's not acknowledged in our health system. It's like a really vague, really big thing. How we can make it concrete? What is their actual problem? Then the next question would be, who are the actors? Who are the people who kind of are affected or involved in this problem, in making it or solving it? And then you will go down to figure out how those people relate to each other and what you can actually do to build some power of your people to affect the goal that you want to create. And you will end up with a strategic goal. You will end up like, okay, this is what we want to do. We are focusing our energy, our efforts towards this thing, so because we think it's something that is important. Is that like kind of clear or less clear, or we will see it's kind of clear? So just briefly, any comments, any questions, ideas before we go into, we have to move on? Yeah, any? Nothing? I give you completely flat kind of emotion, you know? Go ahead.
When you first described kind of the martini glass, the importance of that, reminded me of part of the Gans reading, which was, it was also important to have this very set goal, because when you had a set goal that people could accomplish and actually develop their agency and develop their hope, it made it a stronger movement in general. Like, you couldn't just go to the people and be like, let's stop racism, go. But they could take these small steps, and then that in turn kind of, you know, it started there, and then other people saw that people actually could do things, and then that developed their agency, and it went on until it became a national movement.
Yeah, I like the way you say, like, other people saw. Because one thing about the strategic goal is you will see in a charts, and TFs will work with you on that, is that it should be visual. It should be something that people see. Because buses were great, because everyone could saw that. This injustice that everyone can see. It's really kind of tangible, real, out there, and it's not like happening in a small rooms, but it's happening in front of everyone, which is, thank you for that point. That's a great point. Marshall.
It might be useful to have a definition of power, like what creates power. And for example, if your need for my resources is greater than my need for your resources, who does that give power to? If your need, okay, if you have a greater interest in my resources than I have in your resources, who's got the power? Exactly. And if you reverse it, who's got the power? So power is a relationship. And it's a relationship between resources and interests. And so the question in organizing is to consider, what resources does your constituency have that can influence the interests of others who are making decisions about the problem that that constituency faces? Because that way, it not only solves the problem, it empowers the constituency, because it's their resources that make the difference. And that's the significance of the feat in Montgomery, and the fact that people found in their own feet the power to influence the bus company and all the rest. So thinking of power not as a thing, but as a relationship, may help you locate really where the interaction is and where the sources of power and how you can use things to influence other actors.
Thank you for that, Marshall, because it kind of brought me to memory something that we had in Serbia. Like when we started the anti-corruption campaign with doctors, we called the Department of Health, and we said, like, we need to meet to talk about this thing, because we need to solve this in hospitals. You need to do something about it. You know what happened? They didn't respond to us at all. We kind of like organization trying to call to them. So what we did is actually get out on the streets, like get out to the hospitals, bring 1,500 doctors and 17,000 citizens on board, like signature or in terms of that. And we just brought the big pile with things in their office and put it on a desk at the beginning when we were entering. And you know what happened? The head of the department called us next morning and said, like, we really need to meet. Okay, now we're gonna wait a little bit. So it's not that urgent for us now. We have this capacity. So that's exactly, is that what you're kind of, so like we figured out a way to find the resources that we have in order to be able to get engaged in a conversation with those people who have power that is actually a different one than just like us calling them and asking them, please help, please help, please help. Yeah, go ahead. And we really need to move on, because Wing is gonna kill me probably.
So just one more comment about the fact that there was an aspect of like the agency building was so important in this, and something that gets ignored quite a bit in this conversation is the psychological effects of racism. And you know, these people did not think that they had any power at all. Yeah. And this was just teaching them how much power they really, really had. And that was like a really transformative thing for them as people, as individuals, as well as for the community.
Yeah, that's great. And think about that as well when you go. But we will go back to that in tactics and campaign chart. But thank you again. You're really, yeah. So let's go break up in the small groups.
Before we go, we have a few announcements,
okay,
though.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. So we're going to break out into groups, and then we're not going to come back to this room to debrief. People are going to debrief with another team. So coaches, that debrief is going to start in 60 minutes from now. So at 10:06, that's when the debriefs start. And so later today, people are going home on planes, and we have a shuttle to go to the airport. Can you raise your hand if you are taking the shuttle? Okay. Not taking the shuttle.
Not taking the
It's about the same. You don't have to. Great. Okay, thanks. Now we can break.
Nicholas, thank you. Thank you. Was it like, I kind of at the end, sorry for this longer thing. Is it good? Was it, how do you think?
I have comments for you, but let's
Yeah,
focus on the
okay,
breakout.
okay.
I have good delta, I mean, I have good point.
Okay, cool, that's great. That's good, that's good. That's the learning thing. You did? I can send you the story, I wrote it down.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about actually making a strip out of it.
For all of the awareness raising, like impulses.
Yeah, let's do. And Wing, I just want to tell to my group that you're gonna, yeah. So, hi guys. Because I'm teaching this one and the second one, and so I need to move around to see the groups. Wing is actually going to lead this section for our group. Is that okay? Yeah. Yeah, because I need to see what other people are doing, so be able to bring the kind of thing in the brief. So I'm kind of not be with you, but you know. Was this like clear, or how did you feel? Well, good.